Chapter 8. Thorns of Truth. Night had fallen over Valenhart like a funeral shroud, the sky a tapestry of obsidian velvet pierced by cold, distant stars. Within the castle walls, shadows gathered in corners and crept along stone passages like living things, breathing and watching with ancient patience. Isolde stood at her chamber window, the thorn ring heavy on her finger. 5 nights had passed since her journey to the Red Grove, 5 nights of silence, of Cassian's careful avoidance, of questions that burned in her mind like embers refusing to die. She had waited, patient as the grave, for him to come to her, to speak of what lay between them. Tonight, her patience had run dry. She had prepared her chamber with deliberate care. Dozens of candles lit, their golden light pushing back the darkness, casting the room in a warm glow that belied the chill in her heart. She wore a nightgown of pale silk that whispered against her skin with each movement, her hair loose around her shoulders like a cloak of midnight. When the hidden door finally opened, revealing Cassian's tall silhouette against the darkness of the passage beyond, Isolde felt her breath catch. Even now, after all she knew, the sight of him affected her in ways she could not control. A quickening of her pulse, a tightening in her chest, desire and fear mingled in equal measure. "You're still awake," he said, his voice carefully neutral as he stepped into the room. He was dressed formally, as though returning from some court function. Midnight blue velvet and silver-threaded silk that emphasized the otherworldly paleness of his skin, the inhuman grace of his movements. "I've been waiting for you," Isolde replied, turning from the window to face him fully. "We need to speak." A flicker of wariness crossed his face, quickly masked. "It's late. Perhaps tomorrow would be better." "No," she said firmly. "No more tomorrows, Cassian. No more silences. No more careful distances." She gestured to the chair opposite hers near the fire. "Sit with me." For a moment she thought he might refuse, might retreat back into the shadows from which he had emerged. But then, with a slight inclination of his head that might have been resignation, he moved to the indicated chair and sat, his posture perfect, revealing nothing. "What would you have us discuss?" he asked, his voice betraying nothing of his thoughts. Isolde studied him in the candlelight, the sharp angles of his face, the unnatural stillness of his body, the eyes that held centuries of memories behind their garnet depths. Beautiful and terrible, human and other, a being of contradictions that both drew her and warned her away. "The truth," she said simply. "All of it, this time." His expression didn't change, but something in his eyes shifted. A wariness, perhaps, or resignation. "I've told you about the curse." "You've told me pieces," she corrected. "Fragments chosen with care, arranged to shield me from the whole." She leaned forward slightly. "I want everything, Cassian. Beginning with the most important question." She took a breath, steadying herself. "Do you love me?" The question hung between them, simple and devastating in its directness. Isolde watched his face, noting the subtle tightening around his eyes, the almost imperceptible tension that entered his shoulders. "Why ask a question whose answer can only bring pain?" he countered, his voice carefully measured. "Whether I do or don't, the curse remains, the danger remains." "Because I need to know," Isolde insisted. "Because I've given you my blood, my trust, my heart, and I deserve to know if what I feel is reciprocated, or if I'm alone in this impossible darkness." Cassian was silent for a long moment, his eyes moving over her face as if memorizing every detail. Then he sighed, a sound so soft it might have been imagined. "Yes," he said finally, the word barely audible. "I love you. More than I should. More than is safe for either of us." As he spoke, Isolde felt the thorn ring warm suddenly against her skin. A sharp, surprising pain followed. One of the silver barbs turning inward, pricking her finger, drawing a single drop of blood that welled beneath the crystal. He was lying, or at least not telling the complete truth. Keeping her expression neutral despite the sting, Isolde nodded slowly. "I see," she said, her voice steady despite the disappointment that threatened to choke her. "And when did you first realize this love?" Cassian's gaze dropped to the fire, his profile sharp against the dancing flames. "It grew gradually. Perhaps it began the night I drank from you, when our minds touched, when I felt your courage and compassion." Again the ring heated, another thorn turning inward, another pinprick of pain, another drop of blood joining the first. More lies, or at least more incomplete truths. "Not before?" Isolde pressed, watching him carefully. "Not when you first saw me at the blood festival? Not when you chose me from all the other potential brides?" His jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. "I chose you because you were different. Because you met my gaze without fear, carried yourself with dignity even in that terrible situation. But love? No. That came later. A third thorn turned, a third drop of blood welling beneath the crystal that now glowed with a faint, reddish light." "Stop," Isolde said, her voice sharper than she had intended. "Stop lying to me, Cassian." His head snapped up, eyes meeting hers with sudden intensity. "I'm not—" "Yes, you are," she interrupted, holding up her right hand so he could see the ring, the crystal now clouded with her blood. "Virel gave me this. A truth thorn, she called it. It draws blood when someone lies to me, whether through direct falsehood or omission of crucial truth." Cassian stared at the ring, his expression shifting from surprise to something darker, more complex. "Virel," he repeated, the name like a curse on his lips. Always interfering, always believing she knows better than those actually living the consequences of her meddling. "Is she wrong?" Isolde challenged. "Are you not lying to me right now about your feelings? About when they began? About what they truly are?" He rose abruptly, moving to the fireplace, his back to her as he braced one hand against the mantel. The line of his shoulders was rigid with tension, his knuckles white where they gripped the stone. "What do you want from me, Isolde?" he asked, his voice low and strained. "What truth will satisfy you?" "The real one," she said simply. "Whatever it costs you to speak it. Whatever it costs me to hear it." When he turned to face her, his expression was raw in a way she had never seen before, the careful mask of control finally slipping to reveal the turmoil beneath. "I've watched you for years," he admitted, each word seeming to tear from him. "Not months. Years. I knew who you were long before the blood festival. I arranged for you to be there, to be chosen, to be brought to me." The ring remained cool against Isolde's skin. No heat, no thorns turning inward, no blood drawn. Truth, then. Pure, unvarnished truth. "Years," she repeated, struggling to process this revelation. "But how? When?" "5 years passed," he said, his voice steadier now that he had begun to speak the truth. "I was travelling through the borderlands, inspecting the villages under Valenhart protection. There was a harvest celebration in your village. You were dancing around the bonfire with the other young women, your hair unbound, your face alight with joy." Isolde remembered that festival, remembered the dancing, the music, the rare sense of freedom in a village otherwise bound by strict traditions. But she had no memory of Cassian, of any stranger watching from the darkness. "You saw me once," he continued as if reading her thoughts. "Just for a moment. Our eyes met across the flames, and I felt—" He hesitated, searching for words. "I felt as if time itself had stopped, as if something long dormant within me had suddenly awakened." The ring remained cool, confirming every word as truth. "So, you— what? Kept track of me for 5 years?" Isolde asked, trying to make sense of this new narrative. "Arranged for me to be at the blood festival? Ensured I would be chosen?" "Yes," he admitted. No hesitation now that the dam of truth had broken. "I had you watched, protected from afar. When the time came for the blood festival, I made certain your name was among those selected. But why? Isolde pressed, rising from her chair, moving toward him with slow, deliberate steps. Why me? Why such elaborate machinations for one mortal woman? Cassian's expression shifted, vulnerability replacing the raw honesty of moments before. Because you were different, he said softly. Because when our eyes met across that bonfire, I felt something I had not felt in centuries. And because... He hesitated, then finished in a near whisper, because Virel had prophesied your coming. Isolde stopped, just an arm's length from him, her heart pounding in her chest. What prophecy? That one would come who could break the curse, he said, his voice low but clear. A mortal woman with fire in her heart and steel in her spine, who would either save me or destroy me completely. When I saw you dancing in the firelight, your face illuminated by flames, your eyes meeting mine across the distance, I knew it was you. The ring remained cool, truth, all of it truth. So you brought me here not out of desire, not out of any genuine feeling, but because of a prophecy? Isolde asked, unable to keep the hurt from her voice. Because you thought I might be the key to breaking your curse? At first, yes, Cassian admitted. But then I came to know you, your courage, your compassion, your unwavering strength in the face of a world designed to break you. And what began as calculated interest became genuine admiration. And then... He paused, his eyes meeting hers directly. And then it became something I had not felt in centuries. Love? Isolde suggested. His jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. I chose you because you were different. Because you met my gaze without fear, carried yourself with dignity even in that terrible situation. But love? No. That came later. A third thorn turned, a third drop of blood welling beneath the crystal that now glowed with a faint, reddish light. Stop, Isolde said, her voice sharper than she had intended. Stop lying to me, Cassian. His head snapped up, eyes meeting hers with sudden intensity. I'm not... Yes, you are, she interrupted, holding up her right hand so he could see the ring, the crystal now clouded with her blood. Virel gave me this. A truth thorn, she called it. It draws blood when someone lies to me, whether through direct falsehood or omission of crucial truth. Cassian stared at the ring, his expression shifting from surprise to something darker, more complex. Virel, he repeated, the name like a curse on his lips. Always interfering, always believing she knows better than those actually living the consequences of her meddling. Is she wrong? Isolde challenged. Are you not lying to me right now about your feelings, about when they began, about what they truly are? He rose abruptly, moving to the fireplace, his back to her as he braced one hand against the mantel. The line of his shoulders was rigid with tension, his knuckles white where they gripped the stone. What do you want from me, Isolde? He asked, his voice low and strained. What truth will satisfy you? The real one, she said simply. Whatever it costs you to speak it. Whatever it costs me to hear it. When he turned to face her, his expression was raw in a way she had never seen before, the careful mask of control finally slipping to reveal the turmoil beneath. I've watched you for years, he admitted, each word seeming to tear from him. Not months. Years. I knew who you were long before the Blood Festival. I arranged for you to be there, to be chosen, to be brought to me. The ring remained cool against Isolde's skin. No heat, no thorns turning inward, no blood drawn. Truth, then. Pure, unvarnished truth. Years, she repeated, struggling to process this revelation. But how? When? 5 years passed, he said, his voice steadier now that he had begun to speak the truth. I was travelling through the borderlands, inspecting the villages under Valenhart protection. There was a harvest celebration in your village. You were dancing around the bonfire with the other young women, your hair unbound, your face alight with joy. Isolde remembered that festival, remembered the dancing, the music, the rare sense of freedom in a village otherwise bound by strict traditions. But she had no memory of Cassian, of any stranger watching from the darkness. "You saw me once," he continued as if reading her thoughts. "Just for a moment. Our eyes met across the flames, and I felt—" He hesitated, searching for words. "I felt as if time itself had stopped, as if something long dormant within me had suddenly awakened." The ring remained cool, confirming every word as truth. "So, you— what? Kept track of me for 5 years?" Isolde asked, trying to make sense of this new narrative. "Arranged for me to be at the blood festival? Ensured I would be chosen?" "Yes," he admitted. No hesitation now that the dam of truth had broken. "I had you watched, protected from afar. When the time came for the blood festival, I made certain your name was among those selected." "But why?" Isolde pressed, rising from her chair, moving toward him with slow, deliberate steps. "Why me? Why such elaborate machinations for one mortal woman?" Cassian's expression shifted, vulnerability replacing the raw honesty of moments before. "Because you were different," he said softly. "Because when our eyes met across that bonfire, I felt something I had not felt in centuries. And because—" He hesitated, then finished in a near whisper, "because Virel had prophesied your coming." Isolde stopped, just an arm's length from him, her heart pounding in her chest. "What prophecy?" "That one would come who could break the curse," he said, his voice low but clear. "A mortal woman with fire in her heart and steel in her spine, who would either save me or destroy me completely. When I saw you dancing in the firelight, your face illuminated by flames, your eyes meeting mine across the distance, I knew it was you." The ring remained cool. Truth. All of it truth. "So you brought me here not out of desire, not out of any genuine feeling, but because of a prophecy?" Isolde asked, unable to keep the hurt from her voice. "Because you thought I might be the key to breaking your curse?" "At first, yes," Cassian admitted. "But then I came to know you, your courage, your compassion, your unwavering strength in the face of a world designed to break you. And what began as calculated interest became genuine admiration. And then—" He paused, his eyes meeting hers directly. "And then it became something I had not felt in centuries." "Love?" Isolde suggested. Cassian's hand tightened slightly at her waist, drawing her a fraction closer. "Isolde," he began, his voice rough with emotion. "What you're offering, what you're asking, it may lead to places darker than you can imagine. Or to places more beautiful than either of us has dared to dream," she countered. "We won't know unless we try." His eyes dropped to her mouth, lingering there with unmistakable longing. "And what would that first step be?" he asked, his voice dropping to something near a growl. In answer, Isolde rose on her toes and pressed her lips to his. The kiss was gentle at first, tentative, a question rather than a demand. Cassian remained still for a heartbeat, as if frozen by surprise or uncertainty. Then, with a sound low in his throat that might have been surrender or triumph, he responded, his arms encircling her waist, drawing her fully against him as the kiss deepened from question to answer, from possibility to certainty. His mouth was cool against hers, but warming quickly with the contact, with the heat she generated. He tasted of wine and something darker, richer, a flavour uniquely his own that made her head spin with desire. His hands moved up her back, one tangling in her hair, cradling her head with a gentleness that belied the intensity of his kiss. Isolde wound her arms around his neck, pressing herself closer, wanting to eliminate any space between them, any barrier that might separate his body from hers. The silk of her nightgown was thin, offering little protection from the solid strength of him, from the coolness that emanated from his immortal form. When they finally broke apart, Both breathing heavily despite his lack of physical need for air, Cassian rested his forehead against hers, his eyes closed as if overwhelmed. "Isolde," he murmured, her name a caress on his lips. "We should stop. Think. Consider the consequences before we go further." "I've done nothing but think since I met you," she replied, her fingers playing with the hair at the nape of his neck. "For once, I want to feel instead of think." His eyes opened, meeting hers with an intensity that made her breath catch. "And if the curse manifests? If loving you completely triggers the very thing I've fought so long to prevent? Then we'll face it together," she said simply. "Find a way through it, around it, beyond it." Cassian studied her face for a long moment as if memorizing every detail. Then, with a gentleness that made her heart ache, he brushed a strand of hair from her face. "You are extraordinary," he said softly, "braver than anyone I have known in centuries." The ring remained cool, truth, spoken from the heart. "Then love me," Isolde whispered, her hands moving to the buttons of his jacket. "Love me completely, without reservation, without fear." For a moment, Cassian remained still, watching her hands as they worked at his clothing, his expression a complex mixture of desire and apprehension. Then, with a sound that might have been surrender, he covered her hands with his own. "If we do this," he said, his voice low and intense, "there's no going back. The bond between us will deepen, strengthen, become something neither of us fully understands. Are you certain that's what you want?" Isolde met his gaze steadily without hesitation. "Yes," she said simply. "I want you. All of you. Not just the parts you're willing to share. I want the love you've been afraid to give, the connection you've been afraid to form." The ring remained cool against her skin, her own truth, spoken without reservation. Cassian's expression softened, the last of his resistance crumbling. "Then I am yours," he said quietly, "as you are mine. Whatever comes, whatever price we pay it together." With that, he bent to kiss her again, this time with no hesitation, no holding back. His mouth claimed hers with a hunger that had been too long denied, a passion that had been carefully controlled until this moment of mutual surrender. They undressed each other slowly, each garment removed a revelation, each newly exposed expanse of skin explored with hands and lips and whispered words of appreciation. When they were both naked, standing in the golden glow of candlelight, Cassian lifted her into his arms with effortless strength, carrying her to the bed where he laid her down with a gentleness that belied the hunger evident in his eyes. He joined her there, his body cool against her warmth, his weight supported on his forearms as he gazed down at her with an expression of wonder and desire so intense it made her breath catch. "I have wanted this," he admitted, his voice rough with emotion. "From the moment I saw you across that bonfire 5 years ago. Wanted you in my arms, in my bed, in my life. But I was afraid. Afraid of the curse, afraid of the pain, afraid of losing you as I lost the others." The ring remained cool. Truth, all of it truth. "You won't lose me," Isolde promised, reaching up to touch his face. "I'm stronger than you think, more resilient than you fear." Cassian turned his head slightly, pressing a kiss to her palm. "I want to believe that," he said softly. "More than I have wanted anything in centuries." "Then believe it," she urged, drawing him down to her. "Believe in us, in what we can create together. Love me without fear, without reservation, and let me love you the same way." His response was not in words, but in action, in the press of his body against hers, in the claiming of her mouth with a kiss that spoke of centuries of longing finally finding its focus. His hands moved over her with increasing confidence, learning the contours of her body, discovering what made her gasp, what made her moan, what made her arch against him in wordless plea for more. And Isolde responded in kind, her own hands exploring the cool perfection of his immortal form, marvelling at the contrast between his inhuman beauty and the very human responses she could evoke. The quickening of his breath, the tensing of muscles beneath her touch, the low sounds of pleasure he made when she found particularly sensitive areas. When he finally moved between her thighs, positioning himself at her entrance, he paused, his eyes meeting hers with a question that needed no words. Isolde answered by wrapping her legs around his waist, drawing him closer, her body open and ready for the joining they both craved. The moment of connection was electric, a surge of sensation that went beyond the physical, a merging that seemed to involve not just bodies but souls. Cassian moved within her with careful control at first, his strokes measured, his pace deliberate, his eyes never leaving hers as they established a rhythm together. But as passion built, as pleasure mounted, that control began to slip, his movements becoming more urgent, more primal. His eyes, always garnet bright, now glowed with an inner fire that should have been frightening but instead only heightened Isolde's own desire. She matched him stroke for stroke, her body rising to meet his, her hands gripping his shoulders, his back, anywhere she could reach to pull him closer, deeper, more completely into her. The world narrowed to this bed, this moment, this connection that transcended the physical to become something neither of them had words to describe. As they approached the peak together, Cassian's control slipped further, his fangs lengthening visibly, his eyes burning brighter. For a moment, fear flickered through Isolde, not of him, never of him, but of the curse, of the consequences they had both chosen to risk. But then, he bent to kiss her, a kiss of such tenderness amid the storm of passion that tears sprang to her eyes. "I love you," he whispered against her lips, the words simple but profound in their honesty. "With everything I am, everything I have been, everything I might become, I love you, Isolde Maren." The ring remained perfectly cool, pure, absolute truth. And in that moment of complete honesty, complete surrender, they crested the peak together, pleasure washing through them in waves that seemed to go on and on, each pulse connecting them more deeply, binding them more completely than any ritual or magic ever could. As they lay together afterward, bodies entwined, breath gradually slowing, Isolde became aware of a strange sensation, a warmth spreading through her limbs, not the pleasant afterglow of passion, but something more intense, almost uncomfortable. Looking down, she saw with alarm that her skin was beginning to glow faintly from within, as if illuminated by some inner fire. "Cassian," she said, her voice tight with sudden fear, "something's happening." He raised himself on one elbow, his expression shifting from post-coital contentment to sharp concern as he saw the glow emanating from her skin. "The curse," he whispered, horror dawning in his eyes. "It's manifesting. We were wrong. Love isn't the antidote, it's the trigger, just as it always has been." The glow intensified, the warmth becoming heat, then pain. A burning sensation that spread through Isolde's body like wildfire, making her gasp, her back arching involuntarily as she fought against the agony that threatened to consume her. "No," Cassian said, his voice breaking. "No, not again. Not you. I can't lose you too." He gathered her into his arms, holding her tightly as if he could physically prevent the curse from claiming her. His body was cool against her burning skin, providing momentary relief that was quickly overwhelmed by the increasing pain. "Cassian," Isolde managed through gritted teeth, her hands clutching at his shoulders. "Help me. Please." Desperation clear in every line of his face, Cassian pressed his forehead to hers, his eyes squeezed shut in concentration. "There must be a way," he muttered, more to himself than to her. "There must be something I haven't tried." The pain intensified, making Isolde cry out, her body convulsing in his arms. The glow had become a bright light now, shining through her skin as if she were becoming translucent, as if the very essence of her was being consumed from within. Cassian, she gasped, feeling herself slipping away, feeling the connection between them beginning to fray as the curse did its work. I love you. Remember that. Whatever happens, I chose this. I chose you. His eyes snapped open, meeting hers with sudden, fierce determination. No, he said, his voice stronger now, resonant with a power she had never heard before. I will not accept this ending, not again, not with you. With a movement almost too quick to follow, he bit into his own wrist, drawing blood that was darker than human blood, thicker, gleaming with an inner light of its own. Before Isolde could understand what he intended, he pressed the wound to her lips. Drink, he commanded, his voice carrying the weight of centuries, of power beyond mortal comprehension. Take my blood as I have taken yours. Complete the circle that began with the feeding. Instinctively, Isolde obeyed, her lips closing around the wound, drawing the immortal blood into her mouth, down her throat. It tasted of metal and magic, of power and possibility, of life and death intertwined. As the blood entered her system, the burning sensation began to change, to transform from pain to something else. A tingling that spread through her limbs, a coolness that counteracted the fire of the curse, a strength that pushed back against the consuming force that had nearly claimed her. Cassian watched intently, his free hand cradling her head, his eyes never leaving her face as the glow began to subside, the pain receding, her breathing becoming easier, more regular. When he finally withdrew his wrist, the wound already healing, closing before her eyes, Isolde felt different. Not fully herself, but not someone else either. As if she existed now in some in-between state, neither fully mortal nor immortal, but something new, something undefined. What did you do? She asked, her voice hoarse from screaming, from the blood, from the transformation that had begun and then been interrupted. Cassian's expression was a mixture of wonder and uncertainty. I don't know, he admitted. I acted on instinct, on desperation, on the one thing I hadn't tried with the others, sharing my blood with them as they shared theirs with me, creating a true exchange rather than a one-way taking. He touched her face gently, his fingers tracing the curve of her cheek. How do you feel? Isolde considered the question, taking inventory of her body, her sensations, her awareness. Strange, she said finally, stronger somehow, more connected, to you, to everything around us, as if I can feel the pulse of the castle, the rhythm of the night, the very beat of your heart, as if it were my own. Cassian nodded slowly, his expression thoughtful. The blood bond, he murmured, deeper now, more complete. Not just me taking from you, but you taking from me as well. A true exchange, a true sharing. Is that what saved me? Isolde asked. The blood bond? Perhaps, he said. Or, perhaps. He hesitated, then continued with a note of wonder in his voice. Perhaps it was the words I spoke as you drank. Words I've never said to any of the others. Words I didn't even know I remembered until they came to my lips, in that moment of desperation. What words? Isolde pressed, sitting up slightly, her strength returning with surprising speed. Cassian's expression softened, vulnerability and hope mingling in his gaze. An ancient phrase, he said. From the oldest vampire traditions, before the court, before the politics, before the curses and bindings. Words that were once used to create bonds that transcended death itself. He took her hands in his touch gentle but firm, his eyes never leaving hers. My heart is yours, he said, the words carrying a weight, a resonance that seemed to vibrate in the very air around them. Not just in emotion, not just in feeling, but in essence, in substance, in the very core of what I am. My heart is yours, as yours is mine, bound not by magic or ritual, but by choice, by surrender, by the willing giving of self to other. As he spoke, Isolde felt something shift within her, not painfully this time, but with a sense of rightness, of completion, as if pieces long separated were finally coming together as they were meant to be. The thorn ring on her finger suddenly warmed, not with the heat of deception, but with a different kind of energy, a pulsing that matched the rhythm of her heart, of his heart, of the hearts that were now somehow one. And then, with a soft sound like crystal chiming, the ring shattered, the thorns falling away, the crystal at its centre dissolving into mist that swirled briefly around their joined hands before dissipating into the air. "What just happened?" Isolde asked, staring at the empty space where the ring had been. Cassian's expression was one of wonder, of dawning understanding. "The truth thorn served its purpose," he said softly. "It brought us to complete honesty, to the point where no deception remained between us, where truth was so absolute that the ring itself became unnecessary." He lifted her hand to his lips, pressing a kiss to the finger that had worn the ring. "And perhaps," he added, his voice tinged with hope for the first time since she had known him, "perhaps we have found the fourth path Virel did not know, or did not reveal. Not patricide, not sacrifice, not transformation alone, but truth. Complete, absolute truth, freely given, freely received, creating a bond that the curse cannot touch because it exists outside the realm of deception that gave the curse its power." Isolde considered this, feeling the new connection between them, the strength that flowed from him to her and back again in an endless circuit of shared energy, shared essence, shared life. "Do you think it's broken?" she asked. "The curse, I mean. Truly broken, not just temporarily held at bay?" "I don't know," Cassian admitted, his honesty now as natural as breathing. "But I know that what happened tonight is unlike anything I've experienced before. The curse manifested, yes, but then it retreated, transformed, became something else entirely." He drew her closer, his arms encircling her with a protectiveness that was no longer about keeping her at a safe distance, but about cherishing what they had found together. "Whatever comes next," he said, his voice low but clear, "we face it together. No more secrets, no more fears held in silence, no more protective distance, just truth, and the bond it has created between us." Isolde settled against him, her head resting on his chest where his heart beat with the slow, steady rhythm of immortality. A rhythm that now seemed synchronized with her own, as if their separate pulses had found a common cadence, a shared song. "Together," she agreed, the word both promise and declaration. "Whatever comes, whatever price we pay it together." As they lay there in the candlelight, bodies entwined, hearts beating as one, neither could know what challenges still awaited them, what political machinations, what supernatural dangers, what tests of their newly forged bond. But in this moment, in the aftermath of truth finally spoken and love finally embraced without reservation, they had found something neither had believed possible, a connection that transcended the boundaries between mortal and immortal, a love strong enough to challenge fate itself. And for now, that was enough. Chapter 9. The Tether of Flame. Pain woke Isolde before dawn, a burning sensation that began as a spark beneath her breastbone and swiftly consumed her entire being. It was not like ordinary fire. This flame had texture, had consciousness, had purpose. It crawled through her veins like liquid metal, igniting nerves and searing pathways where before there had been only flesh and blood. She gasped awake, her body arching off the bed, fingers clawing at her nightgown as if she might tear the burning from her chest. The silk ripped beneath her desperate hands, revealing skin that glowed from within. Not the soft golden warmth of candlelight, but the fierce crimson pulse of embers fed by invisible wind. "Cassian," she whispered, her voice cracking on his name. He was already there, materializing from shadow at her bedside, as if her pain had summoned him across impossible distance. His face was stricken, eyes reflecting the glow emanating from her skin. "The binding," he said, his voice tight with barely contained panic. "It's completing itself." He gathered her into his arms, ignoring her protests as he lifted her from the bed. Her skin burned against his cool chest, and she felt through the haze of her own agony an echo of discomfort that was not her own, his pain at touching her scorching flesh. "Where?" she began, unable to complete the thought as another wave of heat rolled through her. "The blood sanctum," he answered, already moving swiftly through darkened corridors, carrying her as if she weighed nothing at all. "It's the only place with magic deep enough to help." Isolde buried her face against his neck, trying to focus on the cold solidity of him rather than the fire consuming her from within. Through the bond that had formed between them, that bond whose consequences were now burning her alive, she felt his heart racing, felt his fear, his guilt, his desperate need to save her. "Not your fault," she managed, the words little more than breath against his skin. His arms tightened around her. "I should never have—" "Don't," she interrupted, forcing strength into her voice despite the pain. "I chose this. I chose you." They descended, down winding staircases she had never seen before, past corridors lit by strange blue flames that cast no heat, through chambers where shadows moved independently of light. The castle seemed to shift around them, revealing hidden passages as if responding to Cassian's silent command. Finally, they reached a massive door carved from obsidian, its surface etched with runes that moved subtly, like ink spreading through water. Cassian pressed his palm against the center, and the door swung inward, revealing the blood sanctum beyond. The chamber was circular, its walls lined with pillars of black marble veined with crimson. In the center lay a pool of liquid, too dark to be water, too still to be blood, surrounded by a ring of silver stones inlaid with runes similar to those on the door. The air was heavy, charged with power that had accumulated over centuries, the residue of ancient rituals, blood offerings, and magic too primal to name. Cassian carried her to the pool's edge and knelt, still cradling her against his chest. "The sanctum water will help cool the binding," he explained, his voice soft but urgent. "It won't stop the process. Nothing can, now that it's begun. But it will make it bearable." "What process?" Isolde asked, her words slurring slightly as the pain made it difficult to think clearly. "What's happening to me?" His expression tightened. "Our souls are binding more completely than I anticipated. What began with my blood taking with our love-making is transforming into something deeper, a tethering that few vampires have experienced with mortals. Your body is struggling to adapt to the changes." Carefully, reverently, he lowered her until the strange liquid in the pool lapped at her burning skin. The effect was immediate, not a cessation of pain, but a transformation of it, changing from sharp, consuming fire to a deep, throbbing ache that, while still uncomfortable, was at least endurable. Isolde gasped at the relief, her body relaxing incrementally as the magical waters worked their effect. She remained still, Cassian's cool hands supporting her shoulders and head, the rest of her body floating in the dark pool. "Better?" he asked, his eyes searching hers. She nodded. "It still burns," she admitted, "but I can think through it now." "I'm sorry," he said, the words heavy with regret. "I never intended—" "For the tether to form so quickly," she finished, feeling his thoughts brush against her consciousness like shadows passing over water. "You expected it to develop gradually." He stared at her, surprise evident in his expression. "You heard my thoughts?" "Not exactly," she said, trying to articulate the strange sensation. "More like, I felt your intention behind the words, the shape of your meaning." Cassian nodded slowly. "The tether allows that. A sharing of emotions, of intentions, sometimes even of memories. It's growing stronger already." Isolde closed her eyes, focusing on the strange new awareness blossoming within her. She could feel Cassian now, not just with her skin where he touched her, but with something deeper, as if part of him resided within her own chest, a shadow self entwined with her essence. His emotions washed through her in gentle waves, concern foremost, then guilt, remorse. And beneath those, a deeper current of fierce protectiveness and something that might have been wonder. "I can feel you," she whispered, opening her eyes to meet his gaze. "Your fear, your regret." Her lips curved in a small smile. "Your curiosity." His expression softened slightly. "And I can feel you," he said. "Your pain, but also your resilience, your determination." His voice dropped lower. "Your forgiveness, which I do not deserve." "No one deserves forgiveness," Isolde replied, lifting a wet hand to touch his face. "That's why it must be freely given." They remained there in silence for some time, Cassian supporting her in the magical waters, Isolde floating between pain and relief as the tether between them settled deeper, forging connections that would bind them inextricably together. Finally, when the burning had subsided to a manageable warmth, Cassian helped her from the pool. Her nightgown clung to her body, soaked through with the sanctum water, which dried almost immediately upon contact with the air, leaving behind a faint shimmer on her skin that caught the light as she moved. "Can you stand?" he asked, his hands steady at her waist. Isolde nodded, though her legs trembled slightly as she took her own weight. "I think so." No sooner had she spoken than a voice cold and refined cut through the sacred silence of the sanctum. How touching, the prince and his mortal toy. They turned as one to see a figure standing in the doorway, a woman of impossible elegance, wrapped in layers of midnight silk embroidered with silver. Her hair, black as a raven's wing, was coiled atop her head in an intricate arrangement held in place by pins crafted from bone. Her skin was pale to the point of translucence, her lips bloodless, her eyes the colour of winter skies before snow. The Queen Dowager. King Renatus's first wife, set aside centuries ago but never formally divorced, still wielding considerable power within the court. Cassian stepped slightly in front of Isolde, his posture shifting from concerned lover to protective warrior in an instant. "Lady Seraphina," he said, his voice carefully neutral. "The blood sanctum is typically closed to all but the royal line and their chosen consorts." "And I was royal consort for 300 years before your mother caught Renatus's eye," she replied, her tone light but laced with ancient venom. She glided forward, her gown making no sound against the stone floor. "I have more right to be here than this. Creature you've brought into our midst." Isolde straightened her spine, refusing to cower despite her wet nightgown and the lingering pain pulsing through her body. "I am Cassian's chosen," she said, her voice steadier than she felt. "Bound to him by blood and magic." The Queen Dowager's laugh was like ice cracking on a winter lake. "Bound, yes. But for how long, I wonder? The prince's previous consorts all found themselves rather shortened by their association with him." Her gaze moved to Cassian, sharp as a blade. "How many mortal girls have you buried now, my prince? 3? 4? I do lose count." Isolde felt Cassian's rage surge through the bond like a flash flood, though his face remained impassive. She placed her hand on his arm, both to steady herself and to remind him of her presence. "I am not like the others," she said simply. "So they all believed." The Dowager drifted closer, her gaze assessing as it moved over Isolde's face. "But you might actually be right. The tether is forming differently with you. I can see it even now, winding between your souls like golden wire. Fascinating." She moved with sudden swiftness, her hand shooting out to grasp Isolde's chin, forcing her to meet that cold, ancient gaze. Cassian tensed beside her but did not intervene, whether from surprise or from some old deference to the Dowager's status, Isolde couldn't tell. "Let me offer you a gift, mortal," the Dowager said, her voice almost gentle. "A way out, a clean severance." Isolde held her gaze steadily. "What kind of severance?" The Dowager's smile was without warmth. "A painless death. Quick, clean, absolute, before the tether completes itself." She glanced at Cassian. "Before he consumes you entirely?" Through the bond, Isolde felt Cassian's shock, followed by a flare of something darker. Not anger this time, but a terrible, yawning fear. Not for himself, but for her. "He would never harm me," Isolde said with quiet certainty. Not intentionally, perhaps. The dowager's fingers tightened on Isolde's chin. "But the curse that flows through his veins is another matter entirely. It hungers for mortal life, for mortal souls. And it will take yours, whether he wills it or not." "Release her," Cassian said, his voice dangerously soft. The dowager ignored him, her eyes never leaving Isolde's. "Consider my offer carefully, child. A swift end now, while your soul remains your own, or a drawn-out agony as the bond slowly consumes you from within. One offers dignity. The other—" She shrugged elegantly. "Well, I've seen what becomes of those who choose the latter path. It isn't pleasant. I said, release her." Cassian's voice had dropped further, resonating with power that Isolde felt vibrate through the stone beneath her feet. This time the dowager obeyed, letting her hand fall away from Isolde's face. "So protective," she murmured. "But then, you always were fond of your toys until they broke." She stepped back, her gaze moving between them. "I'll leave you to your bonding. But remember my offer, mortal. It remains open should you find yourself regretting your choice." With that, she turned and glided from the sanctum, the door closing silently behind her. Her absence left a strange emptiness in the air, as if she had taken some vital energy with her when she departed. Isolde exhaled slowly, unaware until that moment that she had been holding her breath. "She's rather terrifying," she said, aiming for lightness despite the tremor in her voice. Cassian's expression was grim. "She is ancient and patient, and ruled by spite." He turned to Isolde, taking her hands in his. "But she is not wrong about everything." "What do you mean?" He looked down at their joined hands, his thumbs tracing circles on her wrists where her pulse beat steadily. "The tether can be dangerous for mortals. It creates a link between souls that wasn't meant to exist naturally. A bridge between mortal and immortal that strains both." "I know the risks," Isolde said. "Do you?" His eyes met hers, filled with a sorrow that made her heart ache. "The binding is still fresh enough that it could be undone. Not easily and not without pain, but it could be severed before it deepens further." "You want to break it?" she asked, unable to keep the hurt from her voice. "No," he said quickly, his grip tightening on her hands. "Isolde, no. I want you, bound to me, for as long as fate allows. But I need to be certain this is what you want, knowing the full cost." She stepped closer to him, her wet nightgown brushing against his legs. "Tell me then, the full truth, no matter how painful." Cassian's throat worked as he swallowed. "The tether will grow stronger over time. You'll feel my emotions more clearly, experience my memories as if they were your own. You'll know when I hunger, when I feed, even if I'm not feeding from you." "That doesn't sound terrible," she said. "But you'll also feel my pain," he continued. "Every wound, every injury, physical or emotional, will echo in your own body. And the burden of centuries." He shook his head. "I've lived a long time, Isolde. I've done things, seen things, that no mortal was meant to carry. That weight will become yours as well." She considered this, feeling the truth of his words through the bond that already connected them. Yes, there would be pain. Yes, there would be darkness and weight and memories no mortal was meant to endure. But there would also be him, his presence within her, his strength, his love. "I choose it," she said simply. "I choose you with all that entails." "You could still walk away," he pressed, though she felt his hope flaring through the bond like a candle flame in darkness. "Find a mortal life, a mortal lover, children, grandchildren, a natural span of years unmarked by vampire politics and ancient curses." "Is that what you want?" she asked. "No," he admitted. the word rough with emotion. But it might be what you need. Isolde reached up, cradling his face between her palms. What I need, she said slowly, deliberately, is you. Not safety, not predictability. You. She felt his resistance crumbling, felt the moment when his resolve gave way to hope, to acceptance, to a joy so cautious it was almost pain. I love you, he whispered, the words simple but profound, more than I thought possible. For a moment, Isolde expected to feel the sting of the thorn ring, that instinctive warning of deception that had guided her through their earlier conversations. But the ring was gone, shattered in the moment of their complete honesty, and no pain came to suggest his words were anything but pure truth. And I love you, she replied, rising on her toes to press her forehead against his. Enough to carry your pain, your past, your hunger, all of it. He closed his eyes, his breath shuddering out in what might have been relief or surrender. Then let it be, he murmured. For however long we have, let us be bound, heart to heart, soul to soul. They remained there in the sacred stillness of the blood sanctum, foreheads touching, breathing each other's air, the tether between them strengthening with each shared heartbeat. The pain in Isolde's chest had subsided to a warm, steady pulse, no longer burning but glowing, like embers settling into their final sustainable heat. Through the bond, she felt Cassian's emotions flow into her, his love, his fear, his cautious joy, and beneath those, older, darker currents, centuries of loneliness, of grief, of regret. She accepted them all, welcoming them into the shelter of her heart, knowing that in time she would understand each one, would help him carry the weight of memory that had been his alone for too long. In return, she felt him receiving her emotions, her determination, her courage, her unwavering belief in the possibility of redemption, of transformation, of love stronger than prophecy or curse. She felt him marvel at her hope, at her willingness to fight for what others deemed impossible. Later, as they lay together in Cassian's chamber, bodies entwined beneath silk sheets, Isolde drifted towards sleep, lulled by the steady rhythm of his heartbeat beneath her ear. The tether hummed between them, a golden thread that bound them across the divide of mortal and immortal, of life and undeath, of present and past. Just before consciousness slipped away entirely, a name whispered through her mind, not spoken aloud but carried to her on currents of memory that were not her own. Ilarion. She saw it in her mind's eye, a fortress carved from black ice, rising from a mountain of bones, a throne made of ancient wood, twisted and knotted like the souls that had been sacrificed to create it. A figure seated there, neither man nor woman, wearing a crown of thorns that drew blood with every breath. The vision was gone as quickly as it had come, leaving behind only the name and a deep, instinctive dread that settled in her bones like winter frost. Cassian, she whispered, rising partially from sleep, her hand reaching for him in the darkness. He was already alert, his body tensed beside hers, his eyes gleaming in the dark like garnets catching firelight. You saw it, he said, not a question but a grim confirmation. What is Ilarion? She asked, the name like ashes on her tongue. Cassian sat up, drawing her with him, his arm tight around her shoulders as if he could shield her from the knowledge that was already seeping into her consciousness through their shared bond. Ilarion is many things, he said slowly. A place, a person, a prophecy. He looked down at her, his expression grave in the moonlight that filtered through the chamber windows. And if you have seen it, if the bond has shown it to you, then the warning I feared has already come. What warning? His voice was soft but certain, filled with an ancient dread that echoed through the tether between them. That the true war, the one my ancestors fought, the one that created the vampire courts, the one that birthed the curse running through my veins, has finally begun again. Isolde shivered, pressing closer to his side, seeking warmth against the chill that had settled in her heart. And we're at the center of it somehow? Yes, he said simply. Because of the bond. Because of what we've created between us. Something that hasn't existed for centuries. Something that defies the old laws, the old boundaries. His arm tightened around her. Something that threatens powers far older and darker than any vampire court. She should have been afraid, and part of her was the mortal part that recognized the enormity of what he was suggesting. But another part, the part now bound to him by the tether of flame, felt a strange, fierce readiness. Then we face it together, she said, her voice steadier than she felt. Whatever comes, whatever price we pay it together. Cassian pressed his lips to her temple, a kiss both tender and solemn, a sealing of the vow they had made. Together, he agreed, the word an oath in the darkness. Now and always. Outside, beyond the castle walls, beyond the mortal territories and the vampire courts, something ancient stirred in the shadows. Something that had slumbered for centuries, waiting for precisely this moment, this bond, this defiance of established order. The war that had never truly ended was about to begin anew, and at its heart stood two lovers, bound by a tether of flame that neither fate nor ancient power had foreseen.